Hi, this is Nelson, and I have another special video for you from the conference that Marquis Laughlin and I did back in the early spring at Flint Baptist Church. Great church, on fire for Jesus. Great questions came out of that conference. We held Q&A sessions after each of our sessions. And this question is about why are there only 2 churches in the 7 churches of Revelation that do not receive condemnation from Jesus? Really interesting question. Why is that? Well, let's keep watching and maybe we'll find out.
My name is James Combest, and I've been reading in the Revelation, but I've been paying more attention to what the preachers are saying about Revelations. I'm not going to name this particular preacher, he's passed on, but anyway, in the 7 churches that are talked about in Revelations, of those 7 churches, only 2 are recognized by God. And is that because those particular 2 churches, Smyrna and Philadelphia, taught gospel of Jesus Christ?
I have a little bit different view. I believe that 7 churches are sequential, that it goes from Ephesus, and you're going to see that in the next session, so maybe we'll hold off on that. But that Ephesus is associated with the first seal, Smyrna with the second seal, Pergamum with the third seal, and you'll see that a little bit when we have our next session. So we can look at that then. Those 2 churches are not criticized by Jesus in the letters to the 7 churches. However, there's a letter from Irenaeus, who's like one of the early church fathers, to the Church of Philadelphia, just running them up one side and down the other with all sorts of criticism. So in my view, those original churches were chosen symbolically. Philadelphia happens to be a very, very small church, probably more like my home church than a big assembly like this. It's very odd that they were chosen because, Jerusalem wasn't chosen, Rome wasn't chosen, giant assemblies. But they chose like a little Philadelphia and some other very minor churches. Even in Turkey, they were small and they were not necessarily the only churches, and so it's just an unusual thing why they were chosen. And I'm not sure exactly why those 2 are not. I have a pretty good idea why Philadelphia is not criticized, because if it is sequential and it is the church of the rapture, they have already endured the first 5 seals. They are purified, and maybe that is part of the reason why they're not criticized, because they're ready to go. But why Smyrna isn't, I haven't figured that one out.
And I would add that there are some obvious exceptions of people in churches that Jesus rebukes that are actually, we're doing the right thing. And he addressed those people to continue to do what they were going to do.
Yeah,
so,
right.
So it's not like bad church, good church. It's more, Jesus was quick to acknowledge that there are people in churches that he rebuked that actually were doing what they're supposed to do. So it's kind of hard to write off a whole church and say, well,
Right.
he had something bad to say about them, so that's it. Most of the letters are a mix of good news and bad news, commendation, and the 2 places that didn't get any rebukes. We look at them and think, well, they had it going on. The other ones were all bad, but there were people in each one of the other ones that Jesus commended too. So it's a little bit. It's kind of hard to take those letters and say, well, this is just a bad church, or these guys. You know what I mean? There wasn't anybody preaching the gospel or doing something right in these churches because they were rebuked in a way. So you know what I'm saying? It's kind of throwing everybody. It'd be like this church. Well, everybody, maybe Christ would rebuke this church for something, but he would commend it and acknowledge that there were people doing good things in it too. You know what I mean? So I think we have to be careful when we look at the letters to the churches and realize that because Jesus knows everything, he's not making generalities. You know what I mean? He's being pretty specific. So good.
So I hope you enjoyed that little discussion about the 7 churches of Revelation. You know, the 7 churches of Revelation may not only be historic, they also may be prophetic of what is coming in the future during the 70th week of Daniel. If you'd like to learn more about that and what the portion of scripture, 2 entire chapters of the Bible are about, well, click right here. Until then, this is Nelson, and I'll see you there.